Earlier this month, almost a decade after the Gulf War, a study commissioned by the Pentagon has come to the conclusion that a pill the U.S. military gave to American soldiers cannot be ruled out as a contributor to what is known as Gulf War syndrome, those mysterious, often debilitating illnesses that followed some 80,000 American soldiers home from the Gulf. In the course of doing 3 separate stories on the subject, we heard Gulf War syndrome sometimes dismissed as psychosomatic, other times ascribed to Iraqi nerve gas. It wasn't until our final story in that series 3 years ago that we came upon what could very well be the last missing piece of the puzzle, the one the Pentagon now says cannot be ruled out. Every 8 hours during the war, hundreds of thousands of American soldiers stopped what they were doing to take a pill, pyridostigmine bromide, or PB.
Hey boys, you taking your pyridostigmine yet?
It was supposed to protect our troops from nerve gases, including sarin. Several 100,000 Americans who went to the Gulf took pyridostigmine under orders from the Pentagon.
They said, this is for your own protection. You need to continue to taking this as long as we're in Iraq.
Sergeant Carol Piku became sick 1 hour after she took the pill.
As I was driving a convoy into Iraq, I started having the tearing in my eyes. I started runny nose, just like a water faucet. I was drooling. I had excessive muscle twitches, stomach cramps 1 hour after I took it. And the next 8 hour came, I was driving in a convoy with my sergeant major and my ward master. And I couldn't even drive at that point because I was blurred vision was getting worse.
Sergeant Piku said she wanted to stop taking PB, but was ordered to continue.
The enlisted soldiers had a stand-in formation, and we were ordered to take it, and they watched us as we took them.
5.5 years after the war, Carol Piku was still sick. She believed it was because of the pill.
I have central and peripheral vision field disorders. I also have a suppressed autoimmune system that was diagnosed in 1992, antibody development, neurological bowel and bladder incontinence. I wear diapers now since 1992. I started self-catheterizing myself because I can't urinate on my own unless I wet myself. So I've been catheterizing myself 8 times a day since 1992.
Well, I believe if you or I did what the Pentagon did, we would be indicted. I believe it's criminal.
When we first broadcast this story 3 years ago, medical researcher Thomas Tiedt told us the Pentagon should never have given PB to our soldiers. In 1978, he published a study on the form of the drug at the University of Maryland.
Well, it's not a safe drug. As a matter of fact, if one simply picked up the literature, I've counted 30, 40 studies about PB toxicity done in the last 15 years.
And many of those studies were funded by the Pentagon.
It's unbelievable to see what even a dose, a fraction of the therapeutic dose used in patients in the United States, what it will do to nerve and muscle connections within 30 minutes of a single small dose.
The effects of PB were considered reversible. They're supposed to wear off when the drug wears off. But in some people, Tiedt said, that may not happen. His study showed that the drug can cause long-term muscle damage in rats. Should they have known that it was dangerous?
Well, I think it's beyond that. I think it's more than they should have known. I think they did know.
Pyridostigmine bromide has been in use since 1955 for a rare nerve and muscle disease called myasthenia gravis, and it's considered effective and safe for that use. Then, during the 1980s, Pentagon scientists decided it might also work as a deterrent against nerve gas. But it was not approved by the Food and Drug Administration for that purpose. So the Pentagon, just before the war, got permission from the FDA to use it as what's called an investigational drug.
It's right there in black and white. We've been used for guinea pigs.
All of these veterans were sick and angry. Their illnesses ranged from chronic diarrhea to nerve damage. They had no idea that they were taking an investigational drug.
This is America. This is America. We're not supposed to be treated this way.
Yeah, but,
this is not a third world country. It's not communism. We are supposed to trust our leaders.
It's blind faith in your government. You believe that they're going to take care of you and that they're doing everything possible to help you survive in war.
We never got any medical advice outside of take them when you hear the alarm go off.
What information were you given about the drug?
None.
No information.
None. Just experimental.
That's not the way it was supposed to have been. Before the war, the Pentagon agreed to a list of FDA requirements in order to use the drug. They would give soldiers an information sheet on the drug. They would warn them of side effects, and they would monitor their conditions.
Who here got that information sheet? Anyone?
Never saw it.
me.
Never saw
Heard of it.
Never heard of it.
No warning about side effects?
No.
Sir.
The Pentagon also said that they would monitor the effects that the drug might have on soldiers. Have any of you been monitored?
Didn't happen.
No contact whatsoever.
The Pentagon did no follow-up on the effects of PB on soldiers, even though after the war they came up with some disturbing findings. In 1992, scientists at Aberdeen Proving Ground, the military research facility, found that using pyridostigmine might worsen the effects of sarin. So this drug that was given to so many people without their informed consent, this drug, according to their study, made those soldiers more susceptible to any level of sarin exposure. When we broadcast this story in 1996, the Pentagon, after 5 years of denials, admitted soldiers were exposed to sarin when U.S. forces blew up an Iraqi ammunition dump. The Pentagon said as many as 5,000 troops were exposed to the dangerous nerve gas. Sergeant Carol Piku was there.
We thought it was a nuclear explosion because it was so loud and the ground shook so hard. And I mean, that was one that was, I think that's the one that got us all outside running.
Just weeks after the explosion at Camisea, she came home.
My first night back with my husband, I said, you know, Anthony, something's wrong. I don't feel the same. I can't feel my face. I have no sensations. I said, I don't feel the same. I said, my brain doesn't feel the same. I said, I get head pressure. I said, something's wrong.
But when she went to a veterans hospital for help, Carol Piku was sent to a psychiatrist.
I knew it wasn't psychological, but physiologically my body was changing immediately. I had no control over my bowels, my bladder.
In 1996, Senator Rockefeller had been trying to find out what happened with PB.
The Persian Gulf War may have been one of the shortest and most successful wars that we ever had. No doubt it was. Yet the health consequences for the folks who fought in that war are going to be with us for decades.
He said the Pentagon violated international law, the Nuremberg Code, which was written after Nazi doctors conducted medical experiments on human beings during the Second World War. Do you think this was a violation of the
Of course it was
Nuremberg
a violation.
Codes?
It was specifically a violation of the Nuremberg Codes. Because they mention soldiers specifically. You cannot use investigational drugs on soldiers or on people without the consent and the free choice of the soldier to decline to take that drug. It also is a matter of common decency.
Have you asked the Pentagon about their failure to do these things that they promised?
Pentagon doesn't make mistakes, you see. I mean, that's the whole point. The head of the health division, that all health for the Department of Defense, was on CNN with me a year or so ago and said if I had to do it all over again, they'd do exactly the same way.
Back then, we tried for months but couldn't get the Pentagon to talk to us about PB. So that week, we went to the Pentagon's regular briefing to ask some questions. Their spokesman, Captain Michael Doubleday, explained why the troops weren't told what they were taking.
I believe there was a conscious decision made at the time not to tell the troops. And the reason that was done was because there was enormous concern at the time of raising any specter and any concern on an intelligence level with the Iraqis that we were prepared to defend against certain kinds of chemical weapons. So
that was Thursday. On Friday, the Pentagon sent us this fax telling us that their man, Captain Michael Doubleday, was wrong. That information about PB was not held for intelligence reasons. And about Captain Doubleday telling us,
I believe there was a conscious decision made at the time not to tell the troops.
It turns out that's not true either. This fax from the Pentagon says there was no effort to withhold information from the troops, and while the pills got to the Gulf in time, the all-important printed information didn't, which takes us back to medical researcher Thomas Tiedt. He says the whole thing was simply a massive medical experiment.
Typically, when we do clinical research, we're dealing with small trials, 10, 20. Some of the larger trials are maybe 500 patients. But this was actually a clinical experiment that obtained IND approval from FDA, which means an exemption from U.S. law, and it was an experiment in about 500,000 people.
People that were there say it was an experiment that began to go haywire at the worst possible time.
If you had to face the enemy, would you have been able to with these symptoms?
We did. We did.
Yeah. We did.
We did face them.
And after a couple of weeks, our whole unit had flu-like symptoms. I mean, we had blood in the urine, blood in the stool.
Yes. They told us it was hemorrhoid.
That's basically what you had to
somebody
do.
shooting at you, you know, you're on automatic pilot, man. I mean, you're just scared to death. I mean, you know, you're working hard at trying to stay alive. And you're not worried about things like vomiting and diarrhea. You're worried about what's coming at you.
And I think that's what hurts most. We're willing to die for our country. And then when we come forward and say we need some help, they just look at you and say, okay, go see the nurse.
Could pyridostigmine bromide alone have caused many of the illnesses suffered by Gulf War veterans? Scientist Thomas Tiedt said it's possible.
PB toxicity includes muscle weakness, behavioral changes, sleeplessness, asthma, low blood pressure, low cardiac output, tearing in the eyes, hypersecretion. There's a long, long, long list of side effects from PB, and it's unbelievable and stunning to see how they match the Gulf War syndrome symptoms.
If you were physically able and asked to fight for your country again, would you?
In a second.
Yes.
Yes. In a second.
In a second.
In a heartbeat. We still love America. We love our families. We love the citizens that live in America. And we would still protect them if we were able to today. But boy, we will keep our eyes open if it ever happens again. We won't allow the next group of veterans to be screwed like we were.
While the Pentagon now acknowledges there may be a link between pyridostigmine bromide and Gulf War syndrome, they say they cannot rule out using it again, not against sarin, but another deadly nerve agent called soman.